Hi, this is Matt Donegan from Challenger Stories, and I'm here with Alex Fenton. Alex is a partner at the Legends Agency, one of the UK's leading offshore agencies. Alex, tell me your story. Where should we start? Where should we start? You've got a really interesting background, Alex. So it's not just the Legends Agency, which we're going to come to in a minute, but tell me how you started your business journey.
Well, I left university and I worked for a private equity company, which was pretty interesting. And we raised money for growing businesses. That was our mandate. One of the businesses we raised money for was a lending funding circle alike. And I was young, footloose, naive, stupid, I don't know, whatever you want to say. And I thought, I can do this better. And started a lender, which actually is totally and utterly inadvisable for a 25-year-old person with no money. But we did it and we got quite lucky and managed to raise lots of money, lend lots of money. The mandate was essentially making factoring sexy and lending loads of money. And I can promise we didn't make factoring sexy, but we did lend lots of money. And we sold that business just before the pandemic. Again, I call that genius, but my partners in Shell might suggest that was luck rather than judgment. We sold that in December 2019 and we joined the growth lending group. So my business was called GapCap. We then joined the growth lending group, of which I became the chief exec. That was good fun. I say good fun, really fun, lending small businesses money at the start of the pandemic. Very interesting time. During the course of that journey, found that I was pretty unemployable, which is nice to know when you're 30 rather than 65. And from there, sort of grew into various different businesses. I've got a few interests now, one of which is the two that I'm executive on, one of which is a debt advisory business, so similar space to what we did before, but providing the advisory services that allow small and medium-sized businesses to raise debt capital, and then the Legends Agency, which I suppose was the principal reason we're here today, but which provides offshoring services for UK, US, Australian businesses based in South Africa.
Fantastic. So let's talk about the Legends Agency. I find this area fascinating because when you look at what's been happening with productivity in the UK in the last few years, we've slipped down to the 11th place in Europe in terms of productivity, pounds per head in business. Pretty bad, pretty poor statistic. And one of the ways that we work with businesses often to change that is getting more value from the staff that are inside the business. And there's been a massive move to not only towards AI, and we've seen, and that's obviously a huge part of the increases in efficiency in business, but actually offshoring. But it's a dangerous place to be, offshoring staff. There's many pitfalls. Now, Legends Agency, you specialise in particularly South African staff, I believe, and there's some really good reasons behind that, and I'm a big advocate of that as well. I work with South African teams and they can be amazing. So tell me what the Legends Agency does.
Well, we provide end-to-end solution for building a fully compliant, world-class team for your business in South Africa. That's what we do, but we are not a BPO. So when people often think about what used to happen or continues to happen in actually South Africa too, but if you think of Carphone Warehouse in India, right? I mean, I don't know how many phone calls you will have had. There'd be someone who works on the Carphone Warehouse desk, there's someone who works on the British Airways desk, and they sort of swap around, and there's a team in India. British Airways Carphone Warehouse will pay for that Indian service provider to provide that service. That's one way of doing it. The way that we do it, which is through the employer of record service, is that you build your own team. So with the rise of remote working, it doesn't really matter where you are. And so therefore, the way that we describe it to people is we'll provide all of the boring stuff, and your person will be working from home in Cape Town rather than working from home in St Albans, and therefore they will cost you 50%. And that's before you kind of get started on all of the productivity benefits that sometimes are a little less palatable to talk about when you're selling to British people, who of course you're sort of selling against themselves. It's that, but broadly that's what we do, and we do everything from the recruitment to the insurances to the payroll, through to the HR support. You need an office space, we'll provide an office space. You need IT, we'll provide you IT. But we do the whole thing to make sure that your team in Cape Town are set up exactly as if they were working from home, as I say, in Godalming or St Albans or wherever it might be.
So if I was an SME now and I wanted to outsource or offshore some of the skill sets, what would be the key areas that I could see benefits from? What sort of roles do you specialise in?
To be honest with you, everything. To borrow a phrase, we get quite high on our own supply. Have a team. We have a team over here in the UK of 16, and yet our business is 100 people. So we have a lot of people over in Cape Town The only people that we have here and must have here are people who see customers. That's it. If you don't see customers, or you don't have to see customers or clients or whatever it is, I think you can do it offshore. And so particular success stories from our portfolio finance teams, the financial qualifications in Cape Town or in South Africa are almost identical. Also, people get trained in international accounting, so makes sense. We see customer service, an amazing thing to be able to do offshore. Similar design work is a big one. Administrative assistance, my EA is over there. Amazing support for me and support for the other people in the business as well. There's loads and loads and loads of business development reps. So lots of people who will tee up meetings with people in the UK. We've seen so many different, different departments be offshored to be successful. And we kind of laugh sometimes when someone says, I'll start with one. So like, okay, cool. And then within weeks, months, you've got tens and tens of people over in Cape Town. So it's great.
Yeah. I've seen the benefits. The other great things about South Africa is language is not a barrier. Time zone, not a barrier. Very, very close to our own. Skill sets, really high, like you say. I mean, marketing, design, development, there's just so much there. And because there's so much commonality in language, culture may be a slightly different issue, although there are so many I wouldn't call them expats, but they've worked in the UK.
Yeah, loads.
Who go back to South Africa, so they understand us. And if we say, we're in South London or North London or we're in Yorkshire, they kind of know where that is, which you don't get when you're dealing with a call centre in Bangalore necessarily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other element as well is education. The education levels are so high in South Africa, and look, it's quite unpalatable. Unemployment levels are absolutely ludicrous. So when you come to staff, in the UK, your stock of staff, I don't know if you've hired recently, but it's not easy. It's really not easy, and you end up without slamming anyone that we've recently hired, but you end up overpaying for mediocrity essentially. And compare that to South Africa, where your stock, I mean, I've got some amazing people, and if they were over in the UK, there's no way they'd be available to a small growing business like mine. There's just no chance. There's no chance. We've got a particular team in our finance side of things, an analysis team. That team of 4 probably are Goldman Sachs style graduates, and yet they're working for me. And I'm cool with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
And they're certainly not costing me Goldman Sachs money either. So you get amazing quality from amazing educational institutions, brilliant backgrounds. It just is, there's so many benefits to working over there.
So Alex, I'm going to ask you a question. It's just popped into my head, but I think it's really relevant. Give me the 5 top tips for offshoring in South Africa. What are your 5 top tips?
For your business owner.
If you're a business owner now, one of them cannot be use the Legends Agency. You're not allowed to say that. I know that's the underlying message, but you're not allowed to say that out loud. So what's it going to be? What are your 5 top tips for offshoring staff in South Africa?
Well, if you start by using the Legends Agency, so number 1 is qualify yourself out. Okay, so it's the most important thing is that offshoring is not suitable for everyone. Not every business will work with offshoring. If you are allergic to training people remotely, don't bother. Just do not bother doing it, because if you can't train somebody when they're working remotely in St Albans, you definitely ain't going to be able to do it when they're working in Cape Town. So that's my first thing, is opt yourself out if you can't do it. The second thing is do your research. Things in Cape Town matter, or Cape Town, the whole of South Africa, but they matter. If I use Cape Town as the example, that's where the majority of our team are based. Not all of them, but the majority. It really matters which suburb they're from. It really matters what their background is. It matters what educational institution they went to. And actually, to be honest with you, you can pretty much pick, if they say, I live in place X, you can pretty much describe a lot of things about them. And you need to know that. And that's a little bit like saying, okay, right, I'm hiring. If you looked at me and you said, right, Alex lives in this place, you would immediately make an assumption based upon probably my socioeconomic setup. You'd probably work out whether I used a car every day. You'd probably work out where I worked. If I live in Dulwich, right? So you can probably work out my socioeconomic position. You can probably work out that I commute to work not in a car. All of these things that you don't know when you're over there, I would research them. I think they're really, really important. Okay. The third thing I think is to make sure that you've got great people in the UK. You cannot set up an entire business in South Africa and just expect to do it for half the price. It's just not going to happen. So you have to have the buy-in from your UK staff. And I think ultimately beyond that, I suppose maybe the rest of it is think about what works for your company. Lots of people, it's not BPO, it's not kind of sell swords that will move from project to project to project. Like, these people will need training, they'll need nurturing, they'll need development. Think about it like they're working from home somewhere, rather than it's just offshore it in Cape Town, it's just cheap. It's not going to be a silver bullet to do that. And then I can't think of a fifth one. Use the Legends Agency. I don't know if I mentioned that one already.
So there's been some changes in South Africa. So I believe that there's been some legal changes with regards to employment, etc. That's another reason to use the Legends Agency, right? So your specialism is making that pathway easy but also robust. That's what I understand it to be. Is that correct?
Exactly. So we are an employer of record. So how does that work? Substance over form. We employ the staff and then we second them into your business. So that's how it works. And so therefore they are dedicated to you. If your job disappears, their job with us disappears, and then we run it as a payroll. It's PAYE, and the South African IR35 equivalent is coming. It's coming because broadly the South African government wants to encourage external investment, but they also want to encourage tax receipts. So they'd like the people at my company, you employ 100 people, you put them on contract. I don't want to cast any aspersions about what might happen, but I suspect that the tax receipts will be less if I paid them all as contractors versus if I paid them as PAYE equivalent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that's broadly where the legislation is going. I say broadly, it is exactly where the legislation is going.
Yeah, okay. What's been the challenges for you of setting up the Legends Agency in the first place?
To be honest, I'm not the founder. So I'm in a really fortunate position that I am a poacher turned gamekeeper or something, right. Some illusion. So my business partner, Anthony, who is a South African guy, again, as you say, experience of working in the UK, he understands. He's been in recruitment and EOR for a very long time. Right. He is more experienced than me. I'm not allowed to call him older than me. He'd get very, very angry, and he's a black belt jiu-jitsu, so I can't ever say that he's older than me. But he is much more experienced than me in this market. So I was a customer of his. I then left. I was arrogant enough to think, I don't need to use an employer of record. I'll just set up an entity myself. I then came crawling back about 12 months later, saying this is a massive pain in the arse. Please, can you help me again? He said, look, actually, I've set up myself. I can't come after you until the end of my period. So if you sit tight for 3 or 4 months, maybe we can chat then. We chatted then, and it became really, really abundantly clear. And he was kind of starting the business, and it became abundantly clear that a little bit of money and a little bit of business infrastructure, this business could potentially fly. Add to that my UK exposure network, etc., etc. We were able to take that business from what was a kind of a bit of a hobby business to what it is now, which is I think would be in the top 1 or 2 in South Africa in terms of delivering employer of record services. That's the story. In terms of problems, honestly, it's hypergrowth. Bring in the without being political about it, any changes to legislation where businesses have to pay more in the UK, you will see more people thinking about offshoring. And so therefore you can only imagine that from July of last year, it's been a pretty interesting time for us. And I think that since we invested 12 months ago and I became executive and started working in the business as well as kind of being a customer of it, I think we've grown the amount of staff we've got by about 15 times. And I think we've grown in terms of full revenue, like growth, I think it's about 6x in 12 months, which it wasn't a standing start. So it's pretty extraordinary. And the biggest challenge that we've got is managing our internal resource to kind of keep up with that hypergrowth. The people that you hire day one when you're a small business that is kind of, making sure that Anthony's car has got fuel in it. Yeah. It's a very different type of person than the person that you might be hiring today, where we're looking to maybe think about more enterprise sales or whatever. So it's all a big challenge.
Well, there's an expression, what got you here won't get you there.
Yeah, from my experience before, I know full well about that one, because I think sometimes the CEO ultimately ends up being the blocker to the next, or the founder ends up being the blocker to the next stage, which I learned in my finance business, to be honest. Yeah,
that happens. Sometimes CEOs and founders are the biggest blocker to growth in a business. They are what holds it back. It's very common, and I'm sure we've all seen it. So challenges around the growth. Let's just lean in a little bit. Again, not going to get political at all here. But the increase in national insurance was a bit of a shock when it came in. I kind of have a slight different view about the offshoring aspect, because my belief is that if it helps grow businesses, and those businesses they're growing, they gain more mass, they will end up employing more people in the UK. If they are constrained at this moment by NIC, and if you've got 100 employees and then you get this new national insurance bill coming in, how are you going to grow the business when you've suddenly got this dead weight on you? So you can offshore, grow the business, and then as the business grows, then that's going to employ more local people anyway on the ground. Is that a naive view, or is that your view as well?
Yeah, no, I don't think it's naive. I think it's one of the reasons, ultimately. Like, I think it's one of the... We always say to people, my first piece of advice was opt yourself out of offshoring. That's the first thing you should do. It's not a silver bullet for everybody. One of the things you need to think about is it's not just cost. It's not just about a little bit of saving. I'm really irate about this national insurance change. Yeah, you run a business, of course you are. Like, yeah, me too. But actually, the more of a deep kind of reality to that is you're still going to have to grow. If you go and hire a business development an SDR team in Cape Town, if they're any good, you need the AEs in the UK anyway to close the transactions. Yeah. We try and say to people that it's not about cheapness. It's not about making things cheap. It's about growing your business. It's about making sure, if you want to get to scale and you want to do X, Y, or Z, you might need more people to do it. And if you don't have the budget for more people in central London, it makes a lot of sense to put them over in Cape Town for all of the reasons we've discussed.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I get it. I completely get it. I understand. And I think it's a real area of, well, for you it's an area of growth, but I think it can really help build businesses. Is there a particular type of customer that comes to you? Is there the sort of size of business that comes to you?
To be honest, lots. We laugh about this because you sit with your marketing team and say, right, what's our perfect customer? Someone says something, then 15 minutes someone else says something, and then you go through the statistics. You're like, Christ, it's everyone, but it's SMEs. It's I say growing businesses. They don't have to be growing. You might just be shrinking your cost base. It's SMEs that are in a position where they're thinking, well, how can I either grow my business, how can I grow the EBITDA of my business, or actually am I a bit fed up with, and this is a different and difficult conversation, am I a bit fed up of maybe UK entitlement to and job works and all this sort of stuff, like who's turning up at work and who's doing things and how are they doing things, and do people want to work from home 5 days a week? Well, if you want to work from home 5 days a week from mummy's flat in Wandsworth, then actually I might as well have you working from home 5 days a week in Cape Town on a quarter of the price. So there's plenty of kind of things to consider, I suppose, in that.
Yeah, okay. I mean, look, we need to see business growth in the UK. We really, really do.
Yeah, that's where I feel most uncomfortable, honestly, is like I'm sat here peddling. I'm whinging about tax receipts, right? Ultimately, this is where you land. I'm whinging about tax receipts on the basis that I don't want to pay more tax. So I'm NIMBYing the tax receipts. And then I'm promoting whacking a staff off to South Africa, which creates less jobs in the UK and therefore less tax receipts in the UK. And not just that. And so therefore, I find that quite uncomfortable.
Yeah.
But yeah, as you say, one can add to the other. And I really am a massive evangelist about it. And perhaps I'm less loyal to Britain than I was, as a naive 18-year-old.
Yeah, okay. I get it. I clearly understand the kind of moral issues around it. There's a million young people unemployed in the UK, come out of uni and apprenticeship schemes that are looking for work. The unfortunate issue is that a lot of businesses now are struggling with everything that's happened in the last few years. If you can give them a launch pad to growth, then they're going to take it anyway. AI is coming along. I think AI is going to take away more jobs than offshoring. Personally, that's a whole other area. I mean, when you look at, you mentioned the BPOs, but there are some in the UK, and you can see those being shut down by AI. So this isn't one of the only threats to or pressures on the job landscape, the employment landscape in the UK. It's one of a number of them. But it's also a fact of globalisation.
Ultimately, I'm here to make money. I'm not you create businesses because you see opportunities. You don't create businesses because you want to look after your country's tax receipts. Ultimately, that's not the way that works. But talking about AI, I think it'll change jobs. I don't think the UK will be particularly screwed by AI when it comes to unemployment rates. I think this is much more of a fax to email type iteration than just a total sea change in the way that we operate. It's not an industrial revolution, is my view. I don't think it's a full-on industrial revolution. I think it's much more a fax to email kind of, efficiency thing. And I think it's such a cliche, but people who use AI will be very valuable, and people who don't may not. But I don't think it will shrink the jobs.
It'll be interesting to have this conversation in 18 months' time.
And look, I'm really look forward to being wrong.
Yeah. So look, we talked about some of the challenges and some of the moral challenges around this as well. You're looking to become a market leader. You're right up there. You're number 1 or 2 in doing this. How important is it that you become that market leader?
Well, strangely, our market is fragmented. So you have platforms, so Deal, Remote First. There's some great providers out there that are global players. Somewhere it used to be called, can't remember, but there are these great big global players that provide platforms and then partner up in country with providers, and they tend to win the most market share, whereas what we're trying to do is niche it down and get to be South Africa's best employer of record. That's our job. And if our customers want elsewhere, we will partner with these platforms to be able to do that. We also happen to be a provider for some of these platforms as well, so we are the underlying partner. So becoming the market leader for us doesn't look like becoming the best at offshoring or global EOR, like employer of record. That's not what it looks like for us. What it looks like for us is becoming South Africa's number 1 employer of record and recruitment business ultimately, because one of the massive weaknesses about the platforms is that you find somebody, you hire them, you put them through the platform. That's great. It kind of works. It'll be a bit expensive, but you kind of crack on. It's super easy. The platforms, the tech, they're great little businesses, great big businesses. On our side, what we want to do is allow these people to build teams in South Africa. So that's where we want to be the number 1 player. Yeah. 2 reasons for doing that. One is that I will be outcompeted by Deal. They've got more money than me. So I guarantee that they'll outcompete me. So therefore, Anthony and I can't go and build a business that will compete with Deal or Remote or Remote First. We can't do that. But what we can do is build a business that provides a slightly different service. You want to build a business development team over in Cape Town. You want to hire them. Great. We'll find you some brilliant people because we've got a brilliant recruitment team. You want to fire them. Okay, great. We'll deal with that because we've got a brilliant HR team. You want to have them all in an office. Don't worry about it. We'll sort it because we've got a brilliant office space that they can have. So what we want to provide is that end-to-end solution for people that are maybe not looking for just one person that works from home in Cape Town that they found themselves. Yeah. Again, we'll be a little less expensive than the platforms. You might get a slightly less good user experience than the ability to just put their name in a thing, press a button and make a payment once a month. Yeah. You'll have the HR support, which maybe you don't need. What we would like to do is it's about building teams offshore and in particular in South Africa. So that's where we want to get to be number 1. I don't think we're too far off that right now. I don't think we're definitely not too far off that right now.
That, of course, is one of the great dangers of offshoring, is having a pure remote team. Communication then tends to be very difficult. You want them to bounce ideas off each other when you're not in the room, and that's not going to happen if they're all working remotely. Chances are, they may use Slack or any other technology to facilitate that, but actually there's not that kind of moment, those human interactions that are really vital. So I really take your point there.
We struggle with that in our team. Like, it's a perennial struggle, and that's we're the advocates, so that's tough.
Yeah. So what is your biggest win
with offshoring? It is communication. Honestly, it's if you sat in a room, even this conversation, right? We would probably, it goes you, and then it goes me, and then it goes you, and then it goes me, and then it goes you, and then it goes me. If we sit in a room together, we probably 20 times in the hour we'll talk over each other and kind of move the conversation around a little bit more, which you just don't get on video. You just don't get it. And so you don't get that. You also don't get the informality. We have I don't really want a meeting without an agenda. I don't really want a meeting that's for the sake of meeting's sake. But when I'm over in Cape Town, I sit there, I might have, Mbali, who's one of our kind of marketing business ops people. She might be sat there and she'll be like, oh, quick question, answer the question, and away we go. And she's suddenly got advice from me that she never would have got if we were remote, because why would she have ever messaged me that? Or right now I've got messages that have come in on my Slack whilst we've been sat here. If we were, yes, we would have this meeting, but if we were sat in Cape Town, they're saying, oh, can I have a call to discuss this? That's a little bit much, like if we were sat in Cape Town together, it would be 5 seconds, here's the answer, crack on, or whatever. And I think that communication is really tough. It's really tough offshore. Yeah,
dislocation. I guess you've got to take that. That's got to be one of the main considerations when you're considering taking that on board.
Okay. And you've got to protect yourself from it. you got to build things in, you got to do things that align people culturally. That's to say, if the UK team go for a pint on a Friday night, send Uber Eats down to the office in Cape Town with a pint on a Friday night. If the UK team have got an event on a Tuesday afternoon, and so they're all out the office at 4 p.m. on a Tuesday, send your South African team home. Like, you treat it like one team. It makes it so much better, and it's not just an offshore kind of service centre. It would be obviously that's got some limits, but you as close to being one team, one dream as you possibly can. Yeah. And then from a communication perspective, again, you just have to build in good, tight, and learn from the rules you set all the way through. I'm really lucky. We've got this, she's amazing. Taylor Jade is our kind of people and culture person, and she thinks about this stuff, which is useful when I don't so much.
It's super important. So any business needs to start out with its vision, its mission, and its culture. That's what drives any business. You end up with a culture whether you like it or not.
Yeah.
If you don't happen to like the culture in your business, guess what? You made it.
Yeah, there's one person to fire at that point, isn't there?
Yeah, really. So at the end of the day, cultures drive businesses. That's what drives performance. That's what drives the purpose of the business is wrapped up around that culture. So it's great to hear how you treat that offshore team, not just as a remote resource. They're actually integral. They are part of the team. That's really encouraging. Okay, like that. So look, you've run a lot of businesses before in the past. You've been involved with lots of different companies, either involved in or been around lots of different companies because of the background that you have. What have been your biggest learnings?
So many. There's honestly so many. I think the thing rather than learn it, the thing that continues to be a perpetual challenge for me is work-life balance. And I don't actually mean that in terms of like, I want to go home at 5 p.m. every other day or whatever. None of that stuff. But actually building a family and maintaining a family relationship. I listened to the Netflix guy that isn't really tasting, Mark Randolph, and he said what's his biggest achievement? Staying married whilst running businesses. And, my wife and I are very happy. We have a baby on the way, second baby on the way in a matter of days. But I found that as a perpetual challenge, is how do you manage your social life? Like, I like to have friends. I like to play sport. I like to stay fit. I like my wife to like me. I'd like my daughter to grow up with a present father. I'd like all of these things that I'd like to happen. But I'd also like to be a top achiever. And that doesn't necessarily mean financially, but I'd like to build something that I can be super proud of, when the great scorer comes to mark up. Yeah. And I find that is the biggest challenge. So in terms of learnings for me and like things that you want to learn, and every day I'm learning how to manage that a little bit better. And I think that will probably be a big challenge for a lot of people who run businesses, is how do you manage that? How do you manage the ability to pick up Jessica at 6 o'clock, and if you pick her up at 6:05, it's going to cost you £100. How do you manage that? How do you manage the fact that I've got to call with Anthony, a business partner, right? We've got a call, but Jessica's just taking a little bit too long in the bath. So I take her to bed. And I've found myself before catching myself just skipping a page in the book that I'm reading to her because Anthony's call's more important to me on that day, which then makes me hate myself, and then I don't deliver good business or a good family life. And I think it's things like that's where I want to be consistently learning. So less like in business learnings, because I can give you all the cliches. If it's been fucked up, I've done it, I've done it. But the, I hope this is a family-friendly show, but from a like work-life balance, like family-work balance, like that's where I'm constantly trying to understand how I can do that better. Particularly when you've got to go to Cape Town so regularly.
Well, look, it's really important though, isn't it? At the end of the day, you design the business that delivers the lifestyle that you want. If you do it the other way around, you design a business and you end up with a life, and that life means that you're not going to spend time with your family or do the things that really matter. And that when you reflect back on your life, you've not achieved the goals that you set out. You get one shot at this. Life's not rehearsal. We've all heard that.
I also spending a lot of time. What do you want? What do you want? And do you want the things that people say that you think you should have? Like, do I want to spend lots of time with my daughter? That sounds crazy. I'm not sure I do. So that sounds really ludicrous. I'm not sure I do. I want to spend lots of good time with my daughter. So one of the things we've sorted out. Honestly, the 6 o'clock problem was a major problem. And I'd get home and I would have rushed something at work and sprinted home, and I'd get there and I'm dead sweaty and heart rate's at 100 and 180. And I'd get there and I'd then spend an hour's worth of crap time with her. where I'm probably finishing what I got at work. I stick her in front of the TV and I crack on with my life, basically, with my interlude being that, bath time, bedtime, and some Weetabix. Like that's broadly what kind of happened. And actually, we were like, what am I doing? What am I like? Actually, we need to have somebody that collects Jessica at 6 o'clock or 5:30, deals with everything, and I can get home at 6:10, and I can manage that. And I think that, that's what I want. I want good time with her. I don't want lots of time with her. I think that's the most important. And that's, again, like if you layer that out, you can do that for pretty much everything. Do you really want what everyone says that you should want? Do you really want lots of time with a 3-year-old? No, I'm not sure you do. I think you want lots of good quality time with a 3-year-old.
Yeah.
But maybe, again, I really hope my wife doesn't listen to that.
Yeah. So there's a couple of things on that, and they really resonate with me, actually, about spending time with family, etc. A very good friend of mine, this again is a bit of a cliche, but he's a how can I call him? He's a kind of industry veteran. He's a very well-known person in the entertainment industry, someone I used to work with. One of the things that he said was, buddy, when it comes to it, no person I ever worked with, no executive that I ever worked with, when they left their career and they were sitting there smoking their cigar and drinking their brandy, ever said, I wish I'd spent less time with my kids.
Yeah.
But they never say that, right? The one thing they do is they say, I should have been there more for them. And it's the being there more for them, you're right, isn't just about time, it's about the quality of time. Because
Definitely.
Kids spell love, Time. Piling on the cliches here, but that's true, right? You speak to a teenager and the best times they reflect back on their parents is the quality time they had with them. Not just the little bath time, but those really special moments for them, which might have just been travelling somewhere in a car where they had a bit of a laugh. That's important, and that is something that business can rob you of if you don't caution against it. So it's really valuable.
Mobile phones and all, the ability to be at work all the time is awful for someone like me. It's the worst. My dad, I grew up in an entrepreneurial family. My dad was at work a lot, but he used to have a phrase like, be here now, son, be here now, whenever phones came out, because I'd be, when in my early career, I'd be checking the emails here, but also at the Sunday, of course I got banned from having phone at the Sunday lunch show, but you see what I mean? You've got to be here now. Like, if you're not going to be here, be somewhere else, and I think that is physical and metaphorical, and I think that's something that I try and live by with my children, but I'm just trying to learn how to do that, and also stakeholder management is easier said than done as well. So it's those are the things that I want to keep learning and get better at, because I'm really ambitious. I want to build something that's big. I want to build something that's massively financially successful, because to be honest with you, I take a lot of value. I don't give a damn how much money I earn. I really, honestly, I'd be quite shocking to people, I suspect. Like, I don't really care. But the financial success is your metric when it comes to business. So I'd like to build something that's massively financially successful. I'd like to build something that I'm proud of. I'd like to build something that my best mate goes, oh, I'm best mates with him. Like, for that kind of prideful reasons. But doing that whilst also maintaining a good family life, I think is really tricky, and that's what I want to keep trying to be good at, basically, without sounding too cliched and sort of.
Yeah, no, I get it. I completely understand it. I think it's a really valuable and valid perspective. So one last question, because I kind of get the sense that we could probably talk for a couple of hours like this, but let's fill it in. One last question. Your 18-year-old self, walk along the street, you bump into them, what are you going to tell them?
Get a haircut. Just get a haircut, son. No, but apart from that, just have fun. I know it's so cliched, but just there's so much time. I was in such a lucky position. I went to school, I went to university, and I came out and I did at least a year, maybe a year and a half of buggering off around the world, which was paid for by jobs that I couldn't give two monkeys about. Do that for as long as you can, because when you're 35 and you look back at it, those are the times that you want back. It's not I'd really like to make sure that my job title is manager 6 months earlier, or I really would like to earn 100k before I'm 30 rather than before I'm 31. Take that extra time to go and do the things that you really, really want to do, and do it at a time where you've got your foot loose and fancy free. That's what I'd say to myself. But I also then followed my own advice, because I did lots of that sort of stuff. But I'd definitely prolong it for as long as you can, particularly when either it's on someone else's money, or it's on jobs that you just don't care about, so you can kind of keep moving until you find the right thing.
Yeah, Okay, I'll go with that. That's a nice piece of advice.
It's not a soundbite, is it?
It's not. Do you know what? It's not a soundbite. But I was just reflecting back on my own life, and I don't think I started getting serious about job, career, etc. until I was coming up to 30 years old, and I had a whale of a time. You know, I had a great time. It hasn't kind of held me back. But life's an adventure. Often, I think people don't appreciate is what an adventure business can be.
Yeah.
That really. That thing of it's not a boring existence, quite the opposite. It can be very exciting and super stressful. It's not boring at all.
Especially in entrepreneur, like people always say, I'd really like to work in a fast-moving business.
Yeah.
Come
Really.
and join a business that's run by an owner manager person who can't sit still. You know, and then you'll see what a fast-moving business looks like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing to consider in that whole fast-moving business thing is very high proportion of entrepreneurs and business owners are neurodivergent, so about 70%, and that means that things like ADHD can be quite prevalent, and working with someone who has quite pronounced ADHD can be a bit of a journey. It can be frustrating for some people if they're more sort of straight-laced, I'll call it. So that itself can, it doesn't suit everybody, but it is one hell of an experience when you do it. So Alex, look, thank you for your time today. I really appreciate it. I love the tips.
Soundbite them. Good luck.
Well, one of the last tips, of course, is being use the Legends Agency. So that's great.
Exactly.
I don't think we're not going to forget that in anytime soon. And look, we're going to catch up and we're going to find out more about. I want to hear more about what the Legends Agency do. I work with lots of different businesses, as you know, and I often encourage them to look at different ways of recruiting staff, because I do believe that if you can grow the business, you will grow your business domestically, and that's going to employ more people. The simple fact of the matter is we need to become more productive. That's going to make us win. If we're not more productive, we're not going to win. So, Alex, thank you so much for your time today. I really
Thanks for
appreciate
having me.
You're absolutely welcome. Alex, speak to you soon.
Cheers, Matt. Take care.
Bye. You finishing? And the importance of spending quality time with your family. So not just time, but quality time.